who, as I said, was trying to do a really difficult job. And his Antiquities is something that was totally overlooked because people were so upset with his wars of the Jews. But it's very interesting to compare his version of the wars as well as the ideology of his view upon who caused the war against Rome with that ideology that's expressed in the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Midrash. They are a lot more similar than people like to think. And the fact that people have a very different view of that today and have tried to, in quote, rehabilitate the rabbis and focus on Akiva supporting Bar Kokhba and things like that, even though the vast majority of the rabbis said, no, this is a dead end, don't do it, is precisely because in 1948, we won. And in 1948, we suddenly realized that, you know what, having a strong military can lead to Jewish independence, because for the previous 2,000 years, having a strong-ish Jewish military meant murder and death for our people. So trying to rewrite ancient history in light of the success in 1948 is a very big hazard, because people don't want to admit that for most of the previous 2,000 years, actually not having a strong military was probably exactly what we needed to be. And if we had tried to, we would have had slaughter after slaughter after slaughter, and we probably wouldn't be here. But in 1948, the window opened just a crack, and having that military actually meant the difference between life and death. So it's very, very difficult to know exactly what to do in each moment, which is why we study. Segue. Segue of why what we do is so important. All right, so. Yeah. The monitor's off because I don't like having the infinite monitor behind me. Look, the picture of the picture of the picture of the picture of the picture. Yeah. There's only one of me, and I think that's just fine. So we are on page 1170. We are in Parashat Nitzavim. We are getting to the very, very end. And if you just can't bear to say goodbye to Torah, I wonder if that's my tech person. Nope, that's something totally different. And if you're feeling very hard saying goodbye to Torah, don't worry. We're going to start up with Genesis in not too long. So don't fret. Don't fret. All right. So we are on page 1170. We are looking at chapter 30 in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, and we're going to begin with verse 6. This is Moses's turnaround moment, right? That he has been saying to the people, there's going to be all these troubles, there's going to be all these problems, but, and that but is really important, you can return. There can be tshuva, and the people can be restored, and they can be restored to the land, they can be restored in their relationship with God. This is a thing that we need to remember, even as Moses himself is going to be laid to rest. So, with that in mind, I need a volunteer to pick us up from verse 6. Thank you.
Then the Lord your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offspring to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, in order that you may live.
All right. So, first of all, thank you very much, JPS Translation, for euphemizing the word. Opening the heart, uncircumcise it. Or rather, not circumcised. Yeah, you can't uncircumcise. That would not. You can remove the foreskin, right? Which is what's being used here, right? The phrase that's being used is not open in a literal sense. It's not the same verb that we use when opening a door or opening your mouth. This is the verb that is used when you remove the foreskin from, well, where it lives. So what God is saying here is not that we need, and this is why JPS translates it this way, God is not saying that we need a new heart, that we need a new organ. What he's saying is that we have a blockage, that there is an occlusion around our heart. There is a thickening. There is a spiritual deadness, numbness that we need to cut through in order that the heart that we've already got, which is good, will be able to beat and connect and express itself to God in the right way. And that is what is meant by this phrase of to circumcise the heart. Make sense? Okay. Onward.
The Lord your God will inflict all those curses upon the enemies and foes who persecuted you.
Right? So all the stuff that's been happening to us is going to rebound on the people who had been doing it to us. This is, I guess you could call it a little bit of Jewish karma, but really it's more a question of the natural cycle that Judaism sees in all things, which is that as you reap, so will you sow. That if you have been oppressing and causing suffering, then when those people are able to be free and liberated, then whatever benefit you were getting from that oppression and suffering is going to be ripped away from your nation, and your nation will therefore collapse. You can think of, the antebellum South after the Civil War, that there was a collapse of their economy once they freed the slaves, or rather, once the slaves were freed from them. That isn't to say that the slaves turned around and murdered their masters. It is to say that if you build your society on oppression and suffering, when the people you were oppressing and causing suffering to are now free, your society will collapse in the absence of those pillars of misery. And that is why the people who caused us suffering are also going to suffer in turn once we are restored. The calculation here makes sense? Everyone sees the cause and effect? Good. Onward.
You, however, will again heed the Lord and obey all his commandments that I enjoin upon you this day. And the Lord your God will grant you abounding prosperity in all your undertakings, in the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, and the produce of your soil. For the Lord will again delight in your well-being, as he did in that of your fathers, since you will be heeding the Lord your God and keeping his commandments and laws that are recorded in this book of the teaching, once you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul.
All right, so again, heart and soul, levavcha, nafshecha, is used again and again. Of course, we see this most famously in the Ve'ahavta, of how we need to love God. And if we love God, we will do God. And by do God, I mean we will listen to what God has told us to do. We will listen to the Torah, and that will be what guides us. So the same way that if you love another person, you will want to do what that other person hopes you would do. All right. If you love your kids, you're going to want to take care of them. If you love your spouse, you're going to want to take care of them. If you love your parents, you're going to want to take care of them. And if your kid wants a new toy for their birthday, and it is appropriate and affordable and all of that other things, and it would be good for the child, of course you're going to want to give it to the kid. And if you have the capacity to give it to the kid, you will. If you have the capacity, right, which is going to come to the little bit of doubt that's still burrowing at the back of our brain, which is, okay, so God has given us this picture. We're going to come into the land. We're going to mess up. We're going to get kicked out of the land. We're going to return to the land, and this time we're going to do things better. But is it really possible for us to do it? Right? Is it really possible for us to keep Torah? I can say that I love God, but even in a good relationship, I sometimes mess up. So isn't what God is asking of us impossible? Well, guess what? The Torah is going to say no. But for those of you who have never had the experience, I will let you know that from many conversations with different missionaries, the idea that the laws of the Torah are impossible is central to their idea that Christianity has to supplant Judaism. I have sat down with many missionaries who say, no one can do this. This is impossible. Right? You're going to be always sinning if you try to keep the Torah. Therefore, you need something else to wipe away your sins, because your sins are just always going to multiply, because this is just an unreasonable expectation. That's not how the Torah itself thinks of itself, which is why we continue.
Surely, this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to observe it.
Right? The Torah is not waiting for a sequel. Right? The Torah is not waiting for part 2. It's not waiting for more information. If you want to know what God wants you to do, you've already been told it. There's a start, there's an end, there's a lot of study in between, but we've got the full version. And the full version is really not that bad. It's actually not even that long. If you look at the page in front of you, you'll notice that there is sort of one quarter of the page that is in Hebrew, 1/4 of the page that is in the English translation, and half the page is with commentary or blank space. That means that this book is actually only 1/4 as long as it looks. Right? If you were to take that many pages, you could write the entire Torah, as long as you only wrote it in one language. Right? That's not what anyone would call a long book. You look up on these shelves, many of these books would be longer than the Torah would be if you were reading it in just one language. Traditionally, we say the Torah has 613 commandments. Right? How many laws are there in Florida statute? Anyone think there's more than 613? Yeah, and probably on the order of tens of thousands of different types of laws and sub laws and clauses and such.
10,000 in the tax code.
Probably 10,000 just in the tax code. Exactly.
The Florida tax code. The Florida tax code law.
Almost half of these laws do not pertain today because we don't have
and for us, all the more so, because we do not have the temple service, because we do not have things that are dependent upon the temple's existence, or because we don't have any of the Kohanic restrictions, then most of the laws, majority in fact, are no longer in operation. Right? They are currently on pause until such time as Mashiach comes and we know whether we're supposed to rebuild and reestablish or what we're supposed to do. But for us in the meantime, there actually aren't that many of things that we're supposed to do. It may seem like there's a lot to do, or it may seem like I'd rather wait for part 2, but this is what the Torah is trying to tell us. No, this is it, right? It's not that hard. You don't need more information. You've got what you need to. Chop, chop, get to it, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but the 10 Commandments used to be in part of the Siddur. It used to be in the prayer book. It used to be that the 10 Commandments would be read at the beginning, I think, of the service.
Right. As the Siddur developed, different texts made their way in and made their way out. The 10 Commandment made its way out. Mainly as a response to sectarians, which is the polite term that's used for the early Christians that were trying to change the direction of Judaism, who argued that those 10 were the only ones we actually had to worry about. That 10 commandments was enough, and the other 603 were not. And they would point to the fact where they say, look, in your prayers every day, you read only the 10, you don't read all 613. And so the early editors of the Siddur said, fine, then we won't read the 10. So we don't give you the wrong impression that these 10 somehow are privileged above all others in being exclusively still relevant. All of the ones that are still relevant are still relevant. And it's always been rather a mockery to say that only those 10 would be relevant, because you would leave out huge swaths of criminal law at the least that people would absolutely not want to say should be junked by the side of the road. All right, but we got to keep going, otherwise we can't get to our commentary.
See, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to keep his commandments, his laws and his rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land that you are about to enter and possess. But if your heart turns away, and you give no heed, and are lured into the worship and service of other gods, I declare to you this day that you shall certainly perish. You shall not long endure on the soil that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, if you and your offspring would live by loving the Lord your God, heeding his commandments, and holding fast to him. For thereby you shall have life, and shall long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them.
All right, Bacharta b'chayim, right? Choose life. And God doesn't leave it ambiguous of what choosing life means, right? Choosing life is not going to Las Vegas, right? Choosing life is embracing God and embracing Torah. That is the key to life. People will often say, oh, isn't it a shame that there's no instruction manual for life? Which is, I think, a bit of a joke. A, because people don't read the instruction manuals they have for their TV. Why would they read the one for life? And B, we do have an instruction manual for life. It's called the Torah. It's actually a lot easier to understand than the instruction manual for the TV. It's just a little bit longer. But, you know, life is more complicated than you can fit into a pamphlet. So we shouldn't be too surprised. All right, so what do we mean by this idea of the Torah being close to us? Is the Torah being already in our mouth, already in our heart? Well, that's what we're going to sort of focus in on for our commentary. So we're going to begin with some selections taken from Midrash Rabbah, and we'll start at the top.
What the verses above talk about, the attainability of Torah, is what is stated by the verse in Proverbs 24, verse 7. Wisdom is as unattainable to a fool as corals. He opens not his mouth in the gate.
All right, so what does that mean? All right, that's always what the Midrash is going to say. Right? What is meant by wisdom is as unattainable to fools as corals, right? Why can't stupid people become wise? Now, we might think that is like a silly question, because if you're stupid, you're just stupid. Not in this. And to quote the immortal words of Forrest Gump, stupid is as stupid does. That you're only stupid if you do stupid things. And there are stupid things that smart people do. And that keeps them stupid, even though they have all the capacity that is able to allow them to be smart. So when the Torah says you can learn it, you can know it, don't think, oh, I'm too stupid to know the Torah. Instead, think, how do I not behave so stupidly that I keep myself from knowing Torah? And that's what it's going to focus on.
Is it not the case that someone can be very, very smart, a true genius, and yet be a fool?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are geniuses in one realm that are fools in everything else. And there are geniuses that are untapped because their foolishness kept them from ever accessing that capacity within their intellectual mind.
Just to clarify, but wisdom is separate than being smart.
Exactly right. Exactly right. All right. So Rabbi Tanhuma. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
What is meant by wisdom is as unattainable to a fool as corals. Rabbi Tanhuma said, this is the fool who enters the synagogue and sees those who are involved in the give and take of Talmud. And he does not know what they are saying, is embarrassed. As it states, he opens not his mouth in the gate.
Right. So you walk into a class like this one, and you hear a commentary, you hear a position taken by the Talmud or one of our sages, or some discussion among the different students, and you're like, I don't understand a word that they're saying. What are they talking about? I mean, imagine the very first time you walk in, and we're looking at this book. There's language on one side, language on another, commentary here, and all sorts of discussion of concepts that you might have never even heard before. It's okay. Someone calling in. You might be too embarrassed to open your mouth, to even ask what's going on. That is being stupid. Right? Not knowing what's going on is perfectly fine. That's normal. If you've never experienced something, Being too embarrassed to ask a question, that's stupid, as they go on to prove.
And the word gate is a reference to the Sanhedrin, as it states in Deuteronomy 25. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me.
Right? So they prove the gate means the court. The court is where learning happens. It's where discussion takes place. If you're not willing to open your mouth in the gate, then you will stay permanently stupid. Not because God made Torah too hard for you, not because God made you unable to understand Torah, but because you were too embarrassed to ask a question. All those times your teachers ever always told you, there's no such thing as a stupid question, they were right. Right? The only stupid question is the one you don't ask because you're too embarrassed. But how often do we allow ourselves to remain ignorant or foolish of something because we would rather keep our mouth shut and let people think that we understood than open our mouth, show that we don't understand yet, but then have the ability to learn. But we'd rather have the external reputation rather than the internal gain of learning. And that is a huge, huge first step barrier. And that's not the Torah's fault, right? That's our fault. Onward.
Another explanation. The rabbi said, this fool enters the synagogue and sees them involved in Torah, and he says to them, how does one learn Torah in the first place?
Good question.
They say to him, first he reads the Megillah.
The Megillah, right? The Megillah is a lot simpler usually in terms of the Hebrew, the language, the style.
Then in the Sefer Torah, then in Nevi'im, then in Ketuvim. Once he finishes the written Torah, he learns the Talmud. And after that, Halakot, and after that, Agadah, homiletic and narrative interpretations of Torah. When he hears this, he says in his heart, when will I learn all of this? And turns from the gate. This is what is written, in the gate he does not open his mouth.
Right? You walk into a library like this, which is relatively small, and you look at all the books and you say, wait, I got to learn all of this to know? All right, I'm gone, right? What's on TV? Or what's, the latest cat video on YouTube? Because I don't have time to learn all of this. How could I learn all of this? It's impossible. But it isn't impossible, right? The feeling that attaining knowledge is too hard or too difficult or too involved is one of the greatest stumbling blocks to actually attaining knowledge. And it is one of the most insidious and blind self-doubts, as they're going to explain by this lovely parable.
Rabbi Yanai said, to what is this matter comparable? To a loaf of bread which is suspended in the air.
Right, hung. Right, so you got, you're outside and there's a loaf of bread hanging, 50 feet up in the air.
The fool says, who is able to bring it?
Right? How in the world can you get that? It's a loaf of bread hanging 50 feet in the air. I mean, that's crazy. No one can get that. That's impossible.
And the rational man says, did not someone suspend it there?
Right?
So
wait a minute. If there's a piece of bread hanging by a rope 50 feet up, some human being put the rope up there to hang it down. If someone put it up, someone can get it down. Right? If it was made, it can be accessed. It can be taken. So the fact that it exists is proof of its accessibility. Right? It's the loaf of bread that doesn't exist that's impossible to get. The loaf of bread that's there might be hard to get, but absolutely it can be gotten.
He brings a ladder or a pole and brings it down. So too he who is foolish says, when will I read the Torah? And he who is rational, what does he do? He learns a single correct chapter every day until he finishes the entirety of Torah.
Right? You know what? You read a little bit every day, and even a long book will eventually get finished. It's not rocket science. But if you look at a big book and you think, it's impossible, I can't read that. It's just one word after another. You just keep going. It might take longer than reading, the comics in the newspaper, but it's the same basic principle, right? One word after another. So too. So
says Hashem, it is not too incredible for you. That is, it is not too hard. And if it is too hard, it is from you that you are not involving yourself in it. All right, so that's going back to our verse 11, where he's trying to make a little bit of a play on words, where he says, mimcha, right? It's not too far from you. Right? Well, what does he mean by from you? Why use the term from you? Well, the mimcha can mean more than you, or it can mean literally from you.
So what he's doing here is sort of making a play on word to say that it's not too hard, but if you think it is, then it's from you that it is too hard, meaning that it is your choice that has made it impossible. Because yes, the Torah that you leave closed will be impossible for you to learn, but you're the one who chose to leave it closed. It's again, not the Torah's fault that you have decided to give up before you began, or give up after you began only a little. You've got to stick with it, and you have to expect it's going to be hard. You're going to have to ask questions that you might feel stupid asking, but that's the way we learn. Onward.
Then you should not say that to understand Torah and to learn it requires the achieving of a Ruach HaKodesh, holy inspiration, as the generation of the wilderness attained. For from the heavens God spoke with them.
All right, so what he's trying to point out here is that a lot of people seem to believe that the only way you can learn Torah is if God whispers it in your ear, right? That you need some special piety. You need some special emunah, that you already have to have this blazing faith within you. Or you have to be Moses, or even the children of the wilderness. Isaiah, some great, prophetic spark within you, or else you'll never be able to accomplish this. And that is entirely putting the heart before the horse, putting the horse before the cart, or the heart before the course. There's definitely something going on there, but yeah, it's like I said, plays on words come naturally to those who study the rabbis, because it is by the study, by the engagement with the text, that fire begins to burn inside of you. You don't need the fire to start with. You need the study to start the fire. And that is why he's telling us so loudly here, Moses, of saying, this isn't too hard, even though I'm going to disappear. And yeah, I'm the greatest Torah person ever. I kind of wrote it. That doesn't mean that for the rest of you, you can't do what I have left behind. Right? It is absolutely accessible. You don't need to be divinely inspired to get this. In fact, if you try this, that will lead to divine inspiration. Again, rather than the other way around. Carts and horses and all of that. Onward.
And there are, as well, many mitzvot which were commanded of old because they attained Ruach HaKodesh, when they were upon the sea, as they the sages said. A maidservant saw upon the sea more than Ezekiel and the prophets saw. Right,
so basically trying to say, yeah, that generation, they had an experience unlike the experience of anyone ever since, even the great prophets. That doesn't mean the great prophets weren't great, and that doesn't mean the rest of us can't do amazing things with Torah. Right? That's not a precondition. It's just a condition that generation happened to experience. All right. And for all the good it did them.
Or you might say that it is dependent upon mazalot, planetary influence.
Right. The mazals are the constellations. And there were many people who thought that, astrology was a real thing. Not that they actually were gods, but they thought that astrology was science. And that depending upon where you were born and when you were born, that was just, like we would now say that it's in your DNA. They would say it's in your stars. That, it's in your DNA to be smart, or it's in your DNA to be stupid. And they would say, no, it's in your stars to be smart, or it's in your stars to be stupid. Or it's in your stars to be good, or your stars to be bad. And people today, unfortunately, also say similar things, oh, he was born, with a bad temper, or he was born to be a good person. No, sorry, that's not the way it works.
Well, Shabbat 156a states, Mazal makes one wise.
You might think that means that's the only way to get made wise. But
and it is not in heaven.
Right?
And also
so they mean that in the astrological sense. When it says Lo b'shamayim, that it's not in heaven, they mean your success with Torah is not written in the stars. Right? You don't need to look at your horoscope to know if today's a good day to study Torah. It's always a good day to study Torah. And it doesn't matter whether you're an Aries, Pisces, or whatever they've got. It's always good. And all of it will lead you to success.
And also, when you're in Chutz
La'aretz, the diaspora,
which is called Medinat Hayam, nation of the sea, as it is stated in the Talmud in Gittin. You could say that Torah is only understood in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, for the air makes one wise.
All right, so another excuse. If only I lived in Israel, oh, then I could study because the air makes one wise just living in Israel. And I know some Israelis that actually think that living in Israel is all they need, right? They don't actually need to open the Torah because they're breathing the air of the Torah. It's like, yeah, I love the smell of old books too, but smelling old books doesn't actually give the information into your brain. You need to open those books. Whether you live in Jerusalem or whether you live in Orlando, the same requirement is there, which is open it up. And even though we live far away, the Torah just told us, don't say it's too far, right? Don't say I live too far from where Torah is so I can't learn it. And the Torah is right here with you, right? It's infinitely portable. It's possible.
And this is over the sea. And this tells us that it is not so, but rather in every place, all is in the hands of humanity, and understand this.
All right, whenever you get a phrase like understand this at the end of a commentary, it means he wants you to draw additional conclusions that he is either reluctant or unwilling to put into print at this particular point. Right? It's as Confucius used to say, if I teach a student a third and he doesn't go home and figure out the other 2/3 for himself, I won't allow him back as my student. The rabbis weren't so harsh, but the idea is that once a teacher draws your attention to there's something you need to figure out here, you need to figure it out. So understand this. What else? What might the implications be, or what is the counter position when he says all is in the hands of humanity?
Your homework.
All right, so point one, you got to do your homework, right? It's up to you. Now, saying it's up to you is a very radical notion. A lot of people believe that, every single aspect of life is dictated by God, right? That we are living through God's world. God is recreating the world every single instant, and therefore we are passengers in this life. And they'll talk about, the only thing that we have is Yirat Shamayim. The only thing we can have control over is our awe of heaven. And that's a very powerful Talmudic dictum. But what he's trying to say here is that it's in your home, you can do your homework, and that you can access. Because if everything is dependent upon your awe of heaven, but your awe of heaven is entirely dependent upon you, not upon where you were born, not upon how much money you have, not upon when you were born, not upon whether you're already pious or not pious, not upon whether you're patient or impatient. If it's not about any of those things except you and your choice, then that actually means you have the ability to change your awe of heaven. And through your changing of your awe of heaven, you have the ability to change everything else in life, which means everything in life is absolutely entirely in your hands.
You have to do this to really learn it.
Well,
you can study about it as like learning about it versus doing it.
True. I mean, the action is an essential consequence. I mean, that's sort of the idea when Moses is saying that you'll love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and you'll do the commandments. Understanding God, to understand God is to do God.
Yeah.
Right. It's a natural outpouring of understanding and love is to obey, to follow the Torah. So what Tiferet Yonatan is trying to say here is that contrary to many people's fatalistic views, not just of whether they can study or not, but of their lot in life, all of that ultimately comes back to you. Right? There is no such thing as fatalism. Once you recognize that Torah is available to everyone and that Torah is the key to changing everything. Right? You don't have to put up with anything because Torah has given you the key to change everything in life. But you have to actually do it. And ultimately, that's entirely in your hands. Right? God has put the key in your hand, and now you can't claim that there's any door at all in life that is locked to you. Which is annoying, because most of us don't like to have that level of responsibility. Onward. This may sound familiar, although you're probably more familiar with it in the Aramaic, ironically.
Blessed be the name of the sovereign of the universe.
Birich Shemei Demare Alma. Anyone know that particular phrase? Right? Where is this coming from? Where do we do this? Torah service, Shabbat service. So the Shabbat service, when we bring the Torah, or we open the Ark, or bring the Torah Ark, there's actually different versions of that tradition, we recite this passage, which is taken from the Zohar, as well, as you'll see, as a meditation of what is it that we are about to do by engaging with the Torah.
Blessed be your crown and your abiding place. Let your favor rest with your people Israel forever. Show them the redemption of your right hand in your holy temple. Vouchsafe unto us the benign gift of your life, and in mercy accept our supplications. May it be your will to prolong our life in well-being. Let me also be numbered among the righteous, so that you may be merciful unto me, and have me in your keeping, with all that belong to me and to your people Israel.
All right, pause there. If this was not taking place at the Torah service, if this was just a prayer that you wanted to say before you went to bed at night, it would sound like you are asking for God to take care of all your problems, right? God, make me righteous. God, take care of me. God, take care of all of my family and take care of all the people of Israel, right? It is in your hands, God. Okay, that's a nice prayer, especially because you're not just thinking about yourself and you're asking to be righteous rather than like rich. But what happens by doing this during the Torah service? It elevates me, but it's also smacking me in the face with the answer to my prayer. Right? By doing this, this is one of those ways that our sages and leaders over the centuries have introduced very radical notions in ways that unfortunately sometimes get ritualized to the point that we fail to recognize the revolution that they're trying to say, which is, if you want to be righteous, read this book. If you want your life to be better, read this book. If you want your supplications to be granted, read this book. Not because it's a magic incantation, not because you're praying to it like some sort of idol that the Torah is going to answer your prayers, but because God has already given you the tool to do what you are asking for, if it's worthy.
As you're praying this, you are embracing Torah.
Exactly right.
That's the understanding.
That is exactly the understanding. Is that to say this while standing in front of the Torah is to remind us that when we read from the Torah on a Shabbat or at any time, like say Wednesdays around 12, that what we are doing is fundamentally transformative to ourselves and to our world, and that we are not offloading responsibility for the quality of our life to someone else, as we're going to see in the next paragraph, or even to God on God's own. We're not just saying, I'm a helpless baby, God, take care of me. But instead we're saying, this is what I want from God. This is what I want from my life. This is what I'm focused on. And now I'm going to use the thing that will do it for me, that will allow me to achieve those goals, right? So we are focused, we are mindful, we are directed, and then we get down to work. Make sense? Yeah. Right? Because you won't know what you're doing if you got a recipe book, but you don't know what you're cooking. You're not going to be able to make very much dinner out of that. You think about what you want to make, and then you go to the recipe book. Now you'll have a successful time in the kitchen, also known as this life. All right.
You are he that feeds and sustains all. You are he that rules over all. You are he that rules over kings, for dominion is yours. I am the servant of the Holy One. Blessed be he. Before whom and before whose glorious law I prostrate myself at all times. All
right. Notice how the Torah, is being placed on a position of equivalency. Right? The law is the purest expression of God's essence in this world. Right? I mean, yes, I know sunsets are beautiful and the Grand Canyon is amazing and all of that, and to hear stories of kindness and righteousness are very moving and are obviously evidence of God's essence in the world. But if you want the single greatest, densest, collection of God's essence pushing its way into our life, it's called the Torah. Right? And when you stand and look at the Torah as being that, as being God's hand reaching into the world to hold us and to guide us, it makes it much more powerful than just sitting there listening to a bunch of Hebrew being read on Saturday morning or Monday, Thursday, or even when we're studying it together. Onward.
Not in man do I put my trust, nor upon any angel do I rely, but upon the God of heaven, who is the God of truth, and whose law is truth, and whose prophets are prophets of truth, and who abounds in deeds of goodness and truth.
All right, we're going straight to the source. And to get to the source, this is what we use. All right, I don't need to pray to an angel. I don't need to pray to a man. I don't need to ask some man to pray for me. I need to just go to the source. And to get to the source, I just follow the chain of truth. And we've got a good little copy of it right here in front of us.
In him I put my trust, and unto his holy and glorious name I utter praises.
Right, this is the last paragraph that we usually sing out loud. The Bebe Anarachetz. Right, this is the translation of that paragraph.
May it be your will to open my heart unto your law, and to fulfill the wishes of my heart and the hearts of all your people Israel, for good, for life, and for peace.
All right, so open my heart to your law, and then fulfill the wishes. Not fulfill the wishes and open my heart to the law. Right? All we're asking is for a little bit of help of cracking open that uncircumcised heart and letting the Torah come in, and everything else will flow from that. Right? We're not wishing for God to do my wishes and then open myself to the law, because that's not the way life works. And notice the last little caveat, which is always good to add in when you're making a wish: for good, for life, for peace. Right? So if you've got some wish in your heart that isn't a good or life-affirming or peaceful type wish, don't expect those to be answered. And do expect the Torah to help scrub those clean and get rid of them, so that you're wishing for what is appropriate, rather than what you might have been thinking before you bothered to study. What do we think?
When I first started learning many years ago, the thing that struck me as most important, since I'd never heard it before, was Torah is the user's manual for life.
Yep.
People don't know, from the beginning, a priori, that's what it's for.
Right.
If you don't study, you don't even know what it's for in the first place.
Which is so sad, because that was the whole point of giving it to us, right? God did not give us the Torah just so we'd have a record of things that happened in the past.
That's not what you're taught. It's Hebrew school.
Well, I'm proud to say that in our school.
In my generation, that's a long time.
And that theme starts from the very beginning. We're going to go back to Genesis with the tree.
Right.
It's about choosing
right
the way of life.
Exactly right. I mean, that's why, Baharta Bahaim, right? You'll choose life. And you choose life by understanding life. And the only way to understand life is to read the one book that actually explains it as clearly as possible, which is called the Torah. And if you think that it's not a very clear book to read, because after all, we've been spending an hour every week for a number of years together, that's because life itself isn't 100% easy to get your head around. Right? As I mentioned a few sermons ago, anyone who tries to tell you the ancient secrets of the world in a pamphlet or a 5-minute YouTube video is either self-delusional or lying, right? Or charlatan, exactly. Yeah, or making a quick buck. There is no shortcut. But just because there's no shortcut doesn't mean that it's impossible or too hard for anyone. Right? Everyone has access to the same the same treasure. And it's not too distant from any person who allows themselves to actually begin. One word, one page, one chapter, it all adds up. And even if you don't understand everything the first time you go through it, you'll pick up more the second time you go through it, and the third time, and then you'll add a few commentaries in, and then you'll discuss it with others, and it all builds up, and every little piece that you add in helps you understand one more thing. There was a TV show back in, must have been the late 70s, early 80s, called The Great American Hero. And it was a guy who was given a super suit, right, by aliens. And he lost the manual to the suit. So he didn't know what his powers were, right? So when he was flying, he was like, flying through the air, but he would fly. And when people would shoot him with bullets, he'd be like, but the bullets, of course, would bounce off. But he didn't know what his powers were because he didn't have the manual anymore. And I remember there was an episode late in the season where he got a second copy of the manual, and he's like flipping through. He's like, look at all the stuff that I can do. And he tries one of them out, and then he loses the manual again. But because you got to keep the story going. but
It's
that's
still on television.
but that's still this. It's still playing now
Yes.
on the rerun channel.
Yeah, on one of the
Right.
antenna channels.
Because
Yeah.
it's an amazing metaphor for going through life not knowing your own power, not knowing your own strength, not knowing your own capabilities, because you didn't take the book off the shelf, open it up, and say, "Oh, I can do that." Wow, or I shouldn't do that, and if I don't do that, my life might be a little better. Okay, and it's kind of handy to have a manual, but a manual is only as good as you actually use it. Right? Someone gives you an amazing new TV and gives you one of those remote controls with 400 buttons on it. After 10 years, don't you think you'd feel a little silly if all you knew how to do was change the channel and turn the volume up and down? Right? And it's got all these other things. Yeah, I know. I'm looking around the table and I've seen a lot of people who I think only know how to change the channel and turn the volume up and down. There are more capabilities than you can imagine, not just in TVs, but in life.
Come and see the way of the Torah. At first, when she, as Torah, begins to reveal herself to a person for a split second, she gives him a little hint. If he, the reader or hearer, picks up on it, fine. If he does not understand, she sends her messengers to him saying, "Tell that simpleton to come here so that I may speak with him."
Right? You ever been too dense to realize someone was actually flirting with you? Right? Well, the Torah is constantly flirting with us. And most of us, at least for parts of our life, are just too, I don't know what's going on, to realize that this is winking at us and saying, "Come here, come here," right? Just giving the little come hither look, but we miss it. And so the Torah sends out the messengers. Who are the messengers? The prophets, right? The sages, to say, beyond the Torah itself, they have to come for her aid and say, "Hello, idiots."
Even his angels that whisper in ears of people, "There's more, there's more. Keep looking,
Right.
keep looking."
When that feeling of dissatisfaction when you
There's
don't
more.
understand, that's the Torah telling you, "Come, learn."
This is the meaning of the verse. "Oh, tell the simpleton, lacking in brains, turn in here." He is brought close to her. She begins to speak with him from behind the curtain. She speaks in the language of his own thoughts until he starts to understand little by little. This is the level of derashah.
Drasha, right? A drash, like the more subtle interpretation, but still very close to the plain meaning of the text.
Then she speaks to him from behind a thin veil. She speaks in enigmatic parables. This is the level of Agadah.
Right, so Agadah is more of it's the stories, the homiletic. It's
Paradoxes.
Hmm?
Paradox.
Sometimes, not exclusively. It's the teaching of things through another level of understanding. Right? It's not the simple level, the peshat, and it's not the subtle level, the drasha. It is a level of abstraction that is harder for us to get our head around. But you'll notice that we're getting closer and closer to the lady. All right, we began first at a distance, then we moved close, and then there was a curtain. Now the curtain is pulled back and we can see the form more clearly, but there's still a veil between us. And then?
After he becomes accustomed to her, she reveals herself to him face to face, speaking with him of her most concealed mysteries, all the concealed paths which have been hidden in her bosom from ancient days. She says, "Do you remember the hint I gave you back at the very beginning of your search? Do you see how many secrets were embedded in what I said? Do you see how it fits together, all fits together now?"
Right, and that's the question. When we reread the Torah, if you actually have the strength, which is all within our capability to go back and read it again, you'll find that things you didn't understand the first time, now you get. And things that you get now will add to new questions. And those new questions, you'll begin to make associations and connections, and it will begin to come together as a clearer and clearer understanding and clearer picture. It's not easy, right? Remember, it's one step at a time. It's getting the ladder out and going up those steps to get down the loaf of bread. But it all works, and it's all possible, unless you don't open it. That is, I think, one of the most profound things that Moses left for us at the end of his great speech to the nation, which is, you got this, guys. You can do it. Don't give up. Just because Moses is going away doesn't mean that it's all over. And just because you're going to go get busy with your farms and everything once you get on the other side of the Jordan River doesn't mean that you won't have enough time. It's all there. And little by little, it will get better and better and better and more beautiful. And even when things all seem to have gone completely bad, you can always come back, right? It is still waiting for you, winking, calling you, beckoning you, if you'll listen.
And that's the love which underlies the love of God that flows through Torah. And this last verse, I've got a Shir HaShirim commentary. It's the whole idea that there's this love there. And if we turn, it's always there.
Right.
And we just have to turn and allow it to meet us without trying to grab too hard.
Right. Well, and to recognize God wrote this book as a love letter to us. God didn't tell us the Torah because he really just got bored one day and wanted to write a book. God didn't give us the Torah because he thought that we were bored and needed something to do. God gave us the Torah because he wanted us to find our way in the world. And a person that is willing to go through the effort of giving guidance to somebody so that they can find their way through the world with the least amount of suffering, the least amount of pain, the least amount of trouble, that is an incredibly loving person. Well, imagine all the more so when it's not a person that's doing that, but the very creator of all of existence that is trying to help his creations to find their way through that creation. I mean, the emotion of love that we would call that is just profound. So it's not that the Torah was ever meant to be a burden. It's not that the Torah was ever meant to be toil. It was something that would take effort, but it was something that the effort would pay off in just multiple levels of dividends.
The idea that was coming across when we were reading English history, the proverb, Torah is a tree of life to those who seize hold of it. There's a story of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who lived to be 103, 106. When she was a little girl, her mother had her come into her room every morning at 9 a.m. to read one chapter from the Bible, starting when she was 5.
Right.
That was every day.
Yep.
Read a chapter, starting when she was a girl. Somehow there's life in these words, and the power of life flows from the word into us. And it can be seen tangibly if we but open our eyes to look.
Over and over.
Who are those who live to be super centenarians and thriving still at the age of 100?
Well, and even if we don't live to be 100 or 120, if we only live to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 or whatever, how much richer is our life if we actually understand it? If we actually have a connection to it, if we actually realize that we are in control of our destiny because God was willing, because he loved us, to give us the ability to know which buttons to push on the remote, and we can change the channel, which is the final message as we begin 5779 next Sunday night, is if you don't like where you are, you can change the channel. If you like what you got, you can turn up the volume, right? It is in your control. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out the manual to know how to use that remote control, but it's in your hands. Understand this. Be well, and Shana Tova.
Thank you.
We have a class tonight. We do have a class for Mishnah tonight.